Hello, everybody, and welcome to Dr. Deep State. I had no intention of doing a video this morning, and suddenly something struck me, and I cooked this up for you. It is going to be a chunk from um, the Jewish Utopia. So I made sure I didn't make it too long, got a couple pictures in there for you to look at. And on the other side, I'd like to do a little summation and a bit of a rehash and maybe a bit of a critique. So please join me for a reading of the Jewish Utopia. This will be excerpts from the preface and introduction to The Jewish Utopia by Michael Higger, PhD, 1932, and the preface begins, "The aim of this work is to present, in a comprehensive way, the traditional Jewish conception of the ideal life for individuals, as well as for nations. The problems taken up in the book are discussed not from a theological viewpoint, but rather from that of the prophecies of the prophets as interpreted by the rabbis. The doctrines concerning God, Torah, Israel, Messiah, the future world, and so forth are, therefore, referred to only where they are directly related to the subjects of an ideal life in the ideal era to come. For my main problem is to reconstruct an actual ideal social life on the earth as depicted by the rabbis of old." From page 3 of the introduction, "Let us, therefore, listen to the opinion of a Talmudist of the 14th century concerning the ideal world. Rabbi Zara was a Spanish codifier and thus a legalist. At the end of his code, he says, it is a fact well known to everyone who would admit to the truth that many predictions of the prophets concerning a utopia for Israel and mankind have not been fulfilled. As, for instance, and the Lord shall be king over all the earth. In that day shall the Lord be one with a capital O, and his name one. And they shall beat their swords into plowshares and their spears into pruning hooks. Nation shall not lift up sword against nation, neither shall they learn war no more. Nations are producing more swords and ammunition than any other time in the past. Wars of nation against nation are greater and fiercer than ever before." Skipping one paragraph. The two quotations indicate the keynote to the philosophy underlying the rabbinic utopia. An ideal society among the families of nations, as visualized by the prophets, although not realized as yet, will ultimately be achieved. Nations will come, nations will go. Dogmatic Christianity has come, dogmatic Christianity will be gone. Isms have created nations. Isms will destroy nations. Capitalism has brought happiness and woes to mankind. Communism may bring its paradise and hells to mankind. Doctrines have shaped the destinies of peoples. Doctrines may bring destruction to peoples, but the millennium will come only when the nations of the earth direct their efforts toward the visions of the prophets and make function the teachings of Amos, Isaiah, and Micah. Only then will the day be ushered in which the ideal world and our present era will, in the language of a Palestinian Amora, kiss each other, and a sign of the arrival of the new era and the departure of the old. Page 5. Unlike Plato's Republic, where the ends sought are political rather than spiritual, the motive of a prophetic, rabbinical utopia is the spiritual perfection of human society. In the Republic, to be sure, the supreme virtue in the ideal commonwealth is justice. But Plato is chiefly concerned with what will hold the ideal city together. The rabbis, on the other hand, are mainly interested in that ideology which would hold the whole world or the universal state together. The ideal behind the Jewish utopia is spiritual and ethical harmony. Furthermore, the main purpose of the Republic is to discover the reasons for the merits of justice over injustice. But to the spiritual leaders in Israel, this was no problem at all. That justice was superior to injustice, the rabbis knew from common sense as well as from centuries of sad experiences in Israel. A similar contrast may be discerned between modern conceptions of a utopia and the rabbinic conception. In Bacon's New Atlantis, science is the key to universal happiness. Campanella's Civitas Solis pictures a communistic society. H.G. Wells' Utopia is a world communism. It is a single civilization whose net of posts, rules of laws, and order are the same in all communities throughout the world. The unit of social life in these schemes varies from the family, as in More, to the world, as in Wells. The main limitation of these plans, including that of Wells, is that they are one-sided. Their authors do not consider the necessity for a spiritual revolution or for a transvaluation of values. They build their ideal structures on the faulty foundations of the present system. A Jewish utopia begins where Wells leaves off. It starts with the world as the basis of the new social life. From that viewpoint, the rabbis picture first a scheme of a transvaluation of spiritual, intellectual, and material values, and a complete spiritual transformation. Having laid this foundation of the new ideal order, the Jewish idealists proceed with the rest of their plan and complete the superstructure of their utopia. In that part of the structure, there are, to be sure, a few common elements in the rabbinic and the other utopias. As the ideals of common interest and mutual helpfulness, cooperation, supplanting competition in the new social order, the toil of industry being reduced to a minimum, and thus permitting a higher cultural and intellectual life. Like the other utopias, the rabbis were aware of the evils of the present conditions, but optimistic as to the potentialities of mankind in the future. They believed mankind to be a progressive organism endowed with marvelous powers and capabilities, with endless capacities for moral, ethical, and intellectual development. And to conclude today's segment, we will continue. Some modern Jewish thinkers maintain that Judaism developed historically along the same lines as Christianity, in that it was mainly interested in the other world, the world of the soul. Judaism considered this world as a vestibule to the world to come. It was only the period of the modern reform movement that brought a change of attitude toward this world. According to this view, traditional Judaism was not primarily concerned with the worthwhileness of life in this world. That this theory is absolutely fallacious. One learns from the fact that along the views that this world is a preparation for the next, rabbinic literature contains numerous passages describing the king of ideal life that nations as well as individuals must lead so that a universal paradise of mankind might be established in this world, with no reference to the future world whatsoever. In fact, the yearning for an ideal life in this world, as found in rabbinic writings, may be much older than the theory that this world is merely a vestibule to the next world. For that yearning is rooted in the teachings of the prophets, who were mainly concerned with an ideal life of universal peace and brotherhood in this world. Wow, there's just so much there. Um, where to begin? One way to consider this would be an inversely related tree of life and the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, and the inversely related kingdom of heaven and the construction of the kingdom um, of heaven on earth. Um, One thing that jumps out at me, and it has to do very much with the externalization of the hierarchy that's going on today, and rabbis now teaching Kabbalah to um, Jewish students and Gentiles throughout the world, because that was part of the ancient plan. So Gentiles are needed, he said, to fulfill these prophecies. And I maintain that it's very much the consciousness of the Gentile that they want in particular. But for the Christian Gentile, we're asked not to be double minded and to serve two masters. And I believe that it is another spirit in an individual that is focused on the construction of this earthly Jerusalem. I guess I've hit that point a few times before. Um, Transvaluation of values, that's been in place since the French Revolution for sure. And that attempt to have this spiritual revolution. You know, Plato had some of it, Bacon had some of it, H.G. Wells had some of it, but in the final transformation, um, it will it will be um, complete destruction of the old world with its Christian foundations in the age of Pisces that will need to be smashed, reordered, reevaluated to bring in this new Jewish utopia. I enjoyed the introduction. It popped into my head today, and I think I might pick up on a couple other parts of this. But I hope you all have a good week out there, and thank you for joining me today for Dr. Deep State.